So in today's session, we'll shortly be hearing from Amy Coulthard, Market Development Director at EnTrade, followed by Mark Hanmore, Environment and Climate Change Project Manager at Cornwall Council. Amy will be speaking about the support EnTrade offers to LPAs, including certification and verification of offsite schemes. She'll also share EnTrade's approach to monitoring, transparency, etc. We'll touch on their unique matching mechanism. Mark will then follow with a short presentation outlining why Cornwall Council has chosen to engage with EnTrade. We'll have some time at the end for questions, and I'd also be keen to hear any reflections or thoughts on the work being shared today. You can also use the Teams chat for any questions you might have. Thank you, and over to you, Amy.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So yes, I'm Amy Coulthard, Market Development Director at EnTrade. So I'm going to talk for a little bit about nature markets and why we're operating nature markets in the way that we do. And then I'm going to hand over to Mark Hanmore from Cornwall Council to talk about the Cornwall LINC nature market, which we've been working to establish with them over the last 6 months, so that you can have that local planning authority perspective on what we're doing. Talk a little bit about my experience. So I've been with EnTrade for the last 3 years, but prior to joining EnTrade, I was a director at the local wildlife trust, and prior to that I worked for Natural England in various roles, including doing statutory planning work. So my background is working with landholders on agri-environment, but also protected sites, protected species, and some of that statutory planning work that Natural England does, as well as nature recovery, whilst I was working for the Wildlife Trust. And so EnTrade very much has come at the nature markets from the perspective of seeking to drive investment into nature recovery projects from a variety of different sources, including from the sale of environmental credits to voluntary buyers such as corporates, but also regulatory buyers. So those might include housing developers with a biodiversity net gain requirement. So I'm just going to step through just a couple of slides before I hand over to Mark. I'll try not to make it too much like death by PowerPoint, but I understand that you there's a chat function for questions. Please do ask questions. This might be a new area for some of you, and others you might have a bit more of an understanding about it, so you'll all have different questions. So ultimately, what's the problem that we're looking to solve with nature markets? Well, we're looking for a simple, cost-effective solution that provides high-quality environmental credits that drive investment into nature recovery projects, but also enable economic growth. So we know in the short term right now that in some areas development has been halted because of the environmental impact of that development and the need for mitigation to be available to mitigate for impacts. And that's come through with both biodiversity net gain, but also in the nutrient neutrality space. So there's a number of different potential blockers, but I'm going to talk about actually how with well-designed nature markets it doesn't need to be a blocker to development to be delivering that mitigation. And increasingly businesses have legal obligations to disclose their impact on nature and to act on it, and so that's also driving some corporates to be looking to invest in nature recovery projects. But there is limited access to scalable solutions at the moment, so we need to be able to provide that aggregation of both nature-based projects, but also aggregation of demand. So sometimes demand can be quite fragmented. So the biodiversity unit market is quite a good example of that. But I'll talk a bit more about that as I go through. And in the long term, we need to be driving this investment into nature's recovery because there is a long-term need to tackle environmental issues such as climate change, but also biodiversity loss. And in the long term, there will be further regulation likely to come down the track that is going to require businesses to disclose and act on their environmental footprint. So that's only going to increase in the future. So we need to get these mechanisms in place that really do provide these simple, cost-effective solutions. And ultimately, for them to be able to deliver efficiently, we need to be able to be delivering nature markets that are delivering multiple environmental services from individual projects. So really well designed nature markets actually have significant power to both drive investment into nature's recovery, but also unlock some of those blockers around enabling development and also supporting businesses to deal with their environmental obligations. And really well-designed nature markets focus on three key areas. So the environmental improvement that needs to happen, the legal certainty of delivery of that improvement, and economic efficiency. So I'll talk a little bit about that in relation to biodiversity net gain, just to bring that to life for some of you. So where you've got a local planning requirement for, well, a national planning requirement now for biodiversity net gain to happen for all developments, you need to be able to demonstrate the environmental improvement that's going to happen from a project that's delivering that BNG for a development. So you need to have a clear baseline of the habitats that are there, which is done for biodiversity net gain using the UK HABS methodology. And you need to be able to certify that there's going to be an uplift. So that would be using the Defra biodiversity metric, for example. And then you need a monitoring program, a compliance monitoring program in place to make sure that the projects that are delivering that BNG are indeed where they should be and are delivering what they need to give that uplift. You then need legal certainty that those projects will be delivered. So that's done through legal contracts, so Section 106 agreements, or increasingly conservation covenants now as well. So you need to have all of those things in place to be able to deliver biodiversity net gain. And then where nature markets come in is that they provide an efficient mechanism of delivering those things. They provide standardization of that, but also, you know, the oversight and governance and rules around how those markets operate. But in addition to that, you need to have a clear policy framework. So in the case of biodiversity net gain, actually, you've got all of those elements together. One of the challenges that we had with nutrient neutrality when that first emerged was that it hadn't really been thought through in terms of how you were actually going to how you would operate markets around that sort of nutrient mitigation. So that is an area that we did explore first, and so everything that we've developed around our nature markets for biodiversity net gain, we've also done that through for nutrient mitigation for the nutrient markets. And when you're talking about those markets, you're talking about a much higher bar of legal certainty, because the policy aspects of that and the policy framework are based around the habitats regulations. So this is just to provide a bit of context about why have a nature market in the first place. Well, nature markets can provide that economic efficiency and that trading environment, and also those clear rights, both for the landholders delivering the mitigation, but also for developers that are securing that mitigation in the form of environmental credits, and clarity over roles and responsibilities, and confidence, building trust and confidence in those markets through their overall, the rules that underpin them, and the governance and oversight of them. So if we can get nature markets working in this very organised and well-designed way, actually there's no need for environmental obligations to become a blocker to either economic growth or development. So who and what is EnTrade? Well, EnTrade is an experienced market operator. You may have come across us in some other nature market contexts around things like possibly newt ponds, things like that. We have recently relaunched as EnTrade Limited, so we are now an independent company, and we're backed in a joint venture between YTL UK and Arup. And we are ultimately operating all of our markets through a digital platform. We launched a new version of the platform last week, which for the first time includes a secure digital vault and registries that provide full traceability and audit history of any environmental credits sold through the market, and a new local planning authority access portal, which will allow local planning authorities access to those registries. In addition to this, one of the other new aspects for EnTrade is that we're now overseen by the Environmental Markets Board. They oversee the governance framework for participating environmental markets in the UK. So just to touch on that a little bit more about what the Environmental Markets Board is and what they do. So they're providing that operational and scientific oversight of all of the markets that EnTrade's operating. And this is a really important thing, to have robust governance in place. And I think that will become increasingly important as the BSI standards work continues to evolve, in making sure that these markets are operated in a way that is in accordance with those standards. So the Environmental Markets Board provides oversight of all of our systems and processes, but also our monitoring programs and how we certify the projects that are offered in our markets. If you want to find out a bit more about that in a bit more detail, I suggest taking a look at their website. There isn't quite enough time to cover all of that today. So how do EnTrade's markets work? So EnTrade's markets work by running what are called market rounds. So we have time-bound periods during which buyers can bid for environmental credits. So those might be biodiversity units for developers. That's our primary market at the moment, is biodiversity units or nutrient credits for developers with nutrient neutrality requirements or biodiversity net gain requirements. So buyers bid into our markets, and because we're running these time-bound rounds, we can aggregate all of those bids together. And that's really important because these bids are all different scales, different types. Different developers will have different requirements, and many of them have fractional unit requirements. And we can handle both small all the way through to large development requirements, and handle those at once and aggregate them together. So buyers are bidding for credits. Suppliers are then offering to supply nature-based projects. So landholders will be offering to supply woodlands, wetlands, grasslands. So those projects will be delivering biodiversity gain. EnTrade, as the market operator in the middle, is facilitating the trade between those two parties, the aggregation on both sides of the market, as well as facilitating the matching process. So we facilitate the matching process between both buyers and suppliers, as well as facilitating and overseeing the legal framework, so the establishment of the legal agreements required on both sides of the market. We use sort of quite a unique matching process for that. So we have a matching process that's been designed to run through, using an algorithm, all the potential matches and to find the matches that are the most efficient. So by the most efficient, that's the matches that deliver the most projects for the least cost, effectively. There's again more information about how that works available, and we'll send out some links to that afterwards. But what EnTrade is effectively doing is providing an end-to-end service for both buyers and for landholders that are participating in the market, and facilitating all of the financial transactions and the legal framework. There's lots of other people involved in these markets, so EnTrade's not working on our own. There'll be project developers out there working with landholders, so those might be locally NGOs like the Wildlife Trusts and others who are working with the landholders to bring their projects to market. There'll also be planning consultants and architects and others who are working with the developers on the other side of the market to help them, as well as ecologists, to help them quantify their requirements. So there's a lot of other people that are operating in and around the markets as well. So EnTrade's not playing all of those roles. We're very much playing that facilitator role in terms of matching buyers and suppliers and enabling them to find each other quickly and efficiently. And we've standardized this process as much as possible so that it's really easy for both landholders and developers to participate in the market. We take a lot of the complexity out of this space for them. But we also do that for local authorities. So things like habitat management, monitoring and maintenance plans are all standardized so that they're quick and easy to read. You can see how one project compares to another. So in terms of the legal framework that we use, we have one that's been designed and established with Osborne Clarke, with support from Osborne Clarke, that utilises things that are already in place, as well as introducing a few new aspects to it. So when we're operating our markets, we have a market level deed with local planning authorities, and that sets out how EnTrade will operate the markets and any requirements for us to collect compliance monitoring funds that are then distributed to the local authority for the compliance monitoring and enforcement that may be needed in the long term for any projects that are secured using Section 106 agreements. We also have a legal agreement with the Environmental Markets Board that enables them to regulate our markets and provide that oversight of our markets. And we then use bespoke legal agreements for both the supply and demand side of the market in the form of the Environmental Credit Supply Agreement that requires EnTrade to supply a set number of credits to each buyer, and the nature-based project agreements, which requires suppliers to deliver projects to the required standards and enables EnTrade to transfer the rights to the environmental services from those projects to the buyers on the other side of the market. So that's a very quick rattle through of our markets, how they work, and the approach that we're taking. And I appreciate that that's quite a short rattle through, but I think it's really important to pass over to Mark now to just talk a little bit about the Cornwall LINC nature market and how EnTrade has become involved in establishing a nature market for Cornwall. Mark, I'll hand over to you and I'll stop
Amy.
sharing.
Okay. Am I sharing now?
Yes.
I am. Fantastic. Thanks. Morning, everybody. My name is Mark Hanmore. I'm the project manager for environment and climate change at Cornwall Council. I work within the nature recovery team, so not planning, but we have really good links with our planning team. Before I talk a little bit about why my team are working in really close partnership with EnTrade and all the good work they're doing, I just want to kind of set the scene a little bit about our journey over the last couple of years and how we've got to the point of recognising the need for a local nature market in Cornwall and us kind of committing to facilitate that. So for those of you that don't know, LINC is a 2-year funded programme by Defra, actually ended in March 25, and I'm pleased to say we've just secured additional funding for a further year. It stands for Local Investment in Natural Capital. For us in Cornwall, it's Local Investment in Nature Cornwall. And what it is a pilot across 4 cohorts nationwide, which explore how local authorities can help facilitate and charge private finance into local nature recovery projects. So our journey in Cornwall started with the recruitment and upskilling of a great team of people, including ecologists, communications experts, farms advisor, that kind of thing. And we've worked really hard to try and understand what it is that makes a nature recovery project attractive to buyers and investors, and how we prepare them for that journey. As I've said, we're embedded within the wider nature recovery team, and we worked really closely with that team to ensure that we're aligned with the local nature recovery strategy, which Cornwall adopted a couple of months ago. We also have fantastically close links with our Cornwall Isle of Scilly local nature partnership, and indeed it was their pipeline that really set us on our journey to building a picture of really good nature recovery projects in Cornwall. About a year ago, we launched what's called our Cornwall Natural Capital Exchange platform. That's kind of like a matchmaking service for nature recovery projects and potential buyers and investors in Cornwall. We profile 16 currently very high integrity projects across the county, looking for around about £20 million of funding. They vary from, low thousands up to multi-million pound projects, so a real scope. I'll be honest, finding funding for local nature recovery projects from private finance has been a hard slog, and I'm pleased, well, not pleased to say, but I share that experience with the rest of the cohorts as well. It's a slow burn. We have secured about £100,000 of private funding so far, but recognise that just really scratches the surface. We've also identified the potential for around 260 natural capital units across Cornwall, and that's working with potential suppliers to understand the feasibility of those units on their land. We had a lot of interest, 30,000 odd hits, and the model that we've used to develop the platform has been adopted by other councils across the country, so it is gaining some real traction. So it's been successful in showcasing projects in Cornwall, but as I've said, it's a pretty slow burn in terms of actually securing funding. And indeed, the platform is very light touch. It just puts buyers and sellers in touch with one another. It doesn't facilitate trading in any way. It doesn't work with them to develop contracts or develop projects beyond quite a high level kind of fund ready basis. So we've recognised that there's a need to build upon what we've achieved so far, take things to the next level, and really start to facilitate trading in natural capital, which is why we've developed, along with EnTrade, the Cornwall LINC Nature Market. So that's our journey to get there so far. So what is it that we wanted to achieve? We wanted to achieve a simple, equitable market model that was replicable as well. So we are focusing initially on a BNG market round, but our ambition is to potentially run up to 4 rounds a year, kind of spread across different types of natural capital and different strategic and tactical objectives. We don't have the resources, the money, the time, or the experience to develop a market ourselves, which is why we procured EnTrade services. So really build upon their experience and develop a credible and high integrity market for Cornwall. The focus for the market for us was to minimise the seller risk and the upfront costs. So, the cost of actually developing the projects, registering them, only happens after there's been a sale. So that really makes an attractive proposition for the sellers of natural capital. Of our 260 units that I referenced in the previous slide, none of those were actually registered at the time. So, there's obviously something else needs to happen. We want to make sure that the market is really high integrity and is providing, in this instance, regulation compliant units within a strong governance framework. And with the nature of development in Cornwall, lots of small and medium developments, we recognised a real benefit if we could offer fractional units, and the EnTrade market enables us to do that. Why have we chosen BNG? I could dress it up, but it's a mandatory requirement, and that's where the money is at the moment, or that's where we hope it is. So, the objective of my project is to drive finance into local nature recovery. And 2 years of discussions, leads me to the conclusion that the best way for that to happen is for it to be mandated. So BNG is where we've kind of focused for our initial pilot round. We've done a lot of work over the last 2 years to work with potential suppliers to understand the feasibility of BNG. So we recognised there was a good supply side for the market in Cornwall. And we've also got significant Section 106 funding or funds available from voluntary BNG requirements. We need to deploy that money within the BNG context, and the market gives us a good, equitable way of doing that for the council. We saw a lot of benefit in working with a third party that was removed from the council. So, the market operates entirely independently from the council. Of course, we're supporting the initial pilot round, and we do endorse the market to potential developers if they are looking for BNG units, but there are other players out there, so we're not a closed shop in that regard. But we think we've got the right balance in terms of our involvement and how much we promote the market. Environmental Markets Board, that gives us lots of confidence about the rigor and fairness of the market. So understanding that the reputation of Cornwall Council is being protected. And looking ahead, Cornwall Council owns quite a big degree of assets within Cornwall. So we will potentially be a seller of units at some point in the future, and the market allows us to do that in a fair way. We may also be a buyer of units going forward, not only through the voluntary contributions that we need to distribute, but through our own requirements as well. And again, the market gives us a good way of buying and selling at a fair market price. Final slide from me. Partnership with EnTrade, a proven operator with a really strong record, and with national connections as well, beyond the reach of our team here in Cornwall. It's been invaluable. The opportunity to run up to 4 market rounds a year to support our objectives under local nature recovery strategy. We can really use the market as a tactical tool to allow us to focus on specific areas or specific priority areas of the LNRS. We have paid for the setup of the initial market round, and that includes all of the documentation at a standardised format that's acceptable to Cornwall Council and the various regulation. That means that future markets for us will be cost neutral, so there won't be any additional costs to Cornwall Council, which obviously is really attractive as we look with a reducing budget to try and deliver LNRS. It's standardised and simple to use. So the contracts and the documentation are all fully compliant and accessible. The cost structure is fair and it's fully transparent at the outset. And importantly for us, it's not based upon the sale price achieved. So there's not a drive to the top or a drive to the bottom priority there by the market operator, which really is important to us in terms of our reputation. We do have a say in future markets as well, and as I say, that allows us to influence the use of the Cornwall Link Nature Market as a tactical tool to deliver for nature recovery. So we're not the market operator, but we endorse the platform. We can help shape future direction, and we can be a future buyer or a future seller of natural capital. So it's a very flexible solution for us. Again, purely selfishly, the LINC team, one of our objectives is to be self-financing after a period of time and show our direction of travel towards that. Because we've invested in ecological services within my team, we can provide those on the ground development monitoring and baselining services that form part of the market round. So we are able to effectively be a service provider to the market whilst not operating the market. And yeah, finally, we've been able to deliver this at pace. We're 6 months in. The market as a concept launched in April, and we called for projects last week. So a turnaround far greater than we could have achieved on our own with a far better product and end result, we hope, as well. So I'll stop sharing there.
Thanks everyone for joining. A special thank you to Amy and Mark again for taking the time to share their experiences. Greatly appreciated.